Hey, sixth graders. So this is Lesson 6, Day 3, and we are going to wrap up Lesson 6 today by exploring dividing fractions by fractions again. So, first off, you should have your book on page 56. If it's not, pause the video and go get it. Second, just be ready to start the lesson with me. So basically, what we're going to do is we're going to work on page 56 kind of together, one problem at a time. Then, when you get to page 57, you're going to do that because it's independent practice on your own. But I will give you a hint of a couple vocab words. All right, so now let's take a look at number 17. So in number 17, it says, look at the model below, write the division equation that the model represents, and explain how to find the quotient using the model. Now remember, quotient is the answer. So I'm going to write that down here. It's the answer to a division problem. So what I want you to do is pause the video and work on number 17. So come up, look at this model. It's just like what we did in lesson 2 yesterday, where we basically took a double number line and we came up with the division problem. So if you give it your best shot, pause the video, restart it when you're done. Go. Okay, so now here's what I know. What I know is this top fraction here represents the first number, the dividend. So that's going to be my 5/6 because that's what I have. Now the question is, what am I splitting the 5/6 or what am I dividing by? Now to do it, this can be the tricky part. So what you have to do is you have to look at this whole number line because this whole thing is one whole, right? So the question is, what did they split that whole into? And if I count all of the sections, I should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So what they did is they split the whole into twelfths. So the question is, how many twelfths are in 5/6? Now to answer it, here's what they did. Now let me erase some of this here. You see how in red they circled each twelfths? So they were basically counting how many of these twelfths were in the 5/6. So when I answer that, all I have to do is count them. So when I do, I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So the answer is 10. So remember, I'm going to say it again. 5/6 divided by 1/12 means how many 1/12ths are in 5/6. And using the model, we can clearly count that there were 10 twelfths in 5/6. All right, so now, how do I explain it? Explain how to find the quotient using the model. Well, I counted how many 1/12ths were in 5/6. There were 10. All right, if you had that one right, give yourself a C. If you didn't, pause the video and make sure you fix that now. Now in 18, it says, Sam said that 3/2 divided by 1/4 equals 3/8. Draw a model and use words to explain why Sam's statement is not reasonable. Now I'm going to give you an option here because you're going to work on 18. If you think you can draw a model that looks something like this without me, go ahead, pause the video, do all of 18 on your own. Now if you aren't sure how to draw that model, then what I want you to do is I'll set you up to start you, and then from the model you can answer the question. All right, so if you're doing it on your own, pause now. If you want to get help for me to draw the model, then stick with me here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a double number line. So you can do that too. If I get ahead of where you are in drawing this, just pause the video until you get caught up. Now, the top number line, we have 3 halves, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, this is 0, this is 1, and right here is 1 half. I'm splitting it in halves because it says 3 halves. So the bottom number line, that's going to be 0, and that's going to be 1, and this is still going to be half, is going to be, the questions, I'm going to have to split it into fourths. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to split it into 4 sections. So here is 1. I have it in half. That's 2 sections. Now if I split each half in half, I now have to split it into, I have it split into fourths. So now, here's what you're going to do. Remember what Sam says. Let's look at his question again. He says that 2/3 divided by 1/4 equals 3/8. Now remember what that would mean. That would mean how many 1/4 are in 3 halves. So he is saying that there's only 3/8 of a 1/4 in 3 halves. All right? Now, what I want you to do is you're going to explain why he's wrong. Now, in explaining why he's wrong, is you can actually answer that question. How many 1/4 are in 3 halves? And you can say, well, that's the answer, and explain why he's wrong. All right, so anyway, at this point, if you didn't do all of 18 already, your job is to pause the video and answer why Sam is wrong. Restart it when you are done. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. Remember, in this number line, to show 3 halves, I'm going to get my highlighter on here. I have 1 half, 2 halves, which is a whole, and to actually show 3 halves, I'd have to extend my number line over to 1 1/2, and then this would be my 3 halves. Now to answer the question, what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend this over, and I have to figure out how many fourths. So in doing this, I'm going to count how many 1/4 are in 3 halves. Okay? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's why he's wrong. So I'm going to start by saying that. I'm going to say Sam is incorrect because there are 6 1/4 in 3 halves. So 3 halves divided by 1/4 equals 6. Okay, now remember, Sam said it was 3/8. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to explain what maybe Sam was thinking. So when I look up at the problem here, here's what I think Sam did. I think Sam multiplied instead of divided, because I think he did 3 times 1 and got 3, and he did 2 times 4 and got 8. So I think Sam multiplied instead of divided. So I'm just going to add that to my explanation. Sam multiplied, what was the problem? 3 halves times 1/4 instead of dividing. Okay? So to tell why Sam is correct, I just solved the problem, which is always a good strategy, and came up with the correct answer. And then I came up with what I think Sam did. All right, so you can pause the video and make any corrections. You don't need to have my exact words, but I'm hoping you did the model correct. That was a little tricky because I had to add on this chunk over here because it was 3 halves, but I hope you understand how I did that. All right, so now let's go to 19. 19 says, show that 2 divided by 4/6 equals 3 by using a model. Explain why the answer is greater than the number you started with. So we want to know, why the answer, why the quotient 3 is greater than the number you started with. And by the way, that's the dividend right there. And that's the quotient. So why the heck is 3 bigger than 2? I thought when you divide something, doesn't that make the number smaller? Well, in this case, it made it bigger. All right, so I'm going to get you started up with a model. Now, you can always do a double number line like we did above. You would just have to, when you do your number line, instead of going from 0 to 1, because the dividend is a 2, you'd have to do 0, 1, 2 wholes, and do a second number line down below to figure out how many 4, 6 are in 2. Now, another one, if you want to do that, you can go ahead. Another one in this case is I'm going to do, just draw rectangles. So since we're starting with 2, I'm going to draw 2 rectangles. And this is how I'm going to go over it. And I want to know how many 4/6 are in those 2 rectangles. So you know I'm going to have to split them into 6ths and count how many 4/6 are in those 2 rectangles. All right, so anyway, choose one of those models to explain why the answer is 3, and then I want you to explain why the answer is greater than the number you started with. So pause it, get started, go. All right, so let's see how you did. So first off, this is our 2, the 2 rectangles, and we're dividing it into 4/6. So the first thing I'm going to do is split each rectangle into 6ths. Okay, so my 2 holes are split into 6. Now I want to know how many 4/6 are in those 2 rectangles. So I'm going to circle groups of 4/6. I'll circle them in red. So there's one group of 4/6. Here's another group of 4/6. And there are 3 groups of 4/6. You see them? 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to start with that. Explain why show that 2 divided by 4/6 equals 3 using a model. All right, so I just did that. I don't have to write anything about that. But now explain why the answer is greater than the number you started with. I want you to think about it. If you were splitting 2 holes into 2 groups, you would have 1. Your answer would be smaller. Okay? So if you were doing 2 divided by 1, you get 2. Your answer would be the same. So the reason why your answer, your quotient, is bigger is because you're dividing by a number less than 1. Anytime you divide a whole number by a number less than 1, your answer is going to be bigger. Okay? So I'm going to write that down. Because I divided by a number less than 1, I'll say less than 1 whole, my answer is greater, not graded, oops, is greater than where I started, or than what I started with. Okay, so if you had it in your own words, that's fine. If you had it wrong, just make a correction. But pause the video if you need to go back and make any corrections. Remember, you can rewind the video and watch another part again. But now, we are moving on to page 57. And this is your independent practice. So this is kind of like an open-ended question. So let's go through each part, and then we're going to let you guys do it. So first off, it says, use what you have learned to complete the task. Choose one of the following problems to solve. Circle the problem you choose. Now, in this one, it says Greg made 2/3 gallon of lemonade and plans to share it equally among 4 friends. How much lemonade will each friend get? So there's your first choice. Now in the second one, it says Keisha plans to run 4 miles this week if she runs 2/3 of a mile each day, how many days will it take her to run 4 miles? And will she be able to run 4 miles in a week? So, what I want you to do is you are going to choose either the Greg or the Keisha problem and do parts A, B, and C. Now, for the purpose of for me going over this, like, you could do any part you want, but I am going to do the Keisha problem. So if you want to get feedback from me, you're going to want to do the Keisha problem. If you choose to do the Greg problem, you could just show it to me and I'll read over it and tell you if you're right. Okay? Now, before you start, let's go over the parts. So A says write a division expression and draw a model. So write a division expression, you need a division problem, and draw a model. Now remember, the model can be number lines or it could be picture, maybe using rectangles. B says estimate what you think the quotient will be. Now estimate is just kind of like give us your best guess. All right? Now the question says, will the quotient be greater than or less than the dividend? How do you know? This is kind of like the last question on the previous page we just went. Like, why was the answer bigger than what you started with? So this is something to go along with that. And part C, and by the way, remember, will the quotient, your quotient is your answer, be greater than or less than the dividend? The dividend is the number the starting number. So remember, it's the number you start with. Okay? And part C, use your model to explain how to find the quotient and what the quotient means. So explain from whatever model you use in part A how to answer it, and what does the quotient, what does the answer mean? Okay? So your job is to do parts A, B, and C for whichever problem you choose. But no, I'm going to do the Keisha problem. Pause it, work on that, and when you're done, go over the video. Go. All right, so part A says write a division expression and draw a model to represent the problem. So I'm going to start with the division expression. So if Keisha is planning to run 4 miles this week and she runs 2/3 of a mile each day, what she's going to do is she's taking her 4 miles and splitting it into 2/3 miles in a day. Okay, so that's my division expression. Okay, now how many days will it take her to run 4 miles? Now it's 2/3 miles in a day, so in other words, how many 2/3 are in 4, right? Okay, so now it says draw a model to represent the problem. So you can do number line or you can do rectangles. So I'm going to draw 4 rectangles. These represent the 4 miles that Keisha is going to run this week. And she plans to do 2/3 mile each day, so I have to split each one of these in 2/3. And each day she runs 2/3 of a mile. So basically how many 2/3 are in 4? So I'm going to go through and I'm going to circle all the 2/3. So here is 1, here is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So each one of those things I circled is the 2/3, and it's also how far she runs in a day. So if I count all those up, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that means the answer, well, I wasn't supposed to answer yet in part A, but I at least have the model done. All right. Part B says estimate what you think the quotient will be, the answer. Will the quotient be greater than or less than the dividend? How do you know? Now, if I estimate, I can kind of figure out what the answer is already because I went up and did it, so I'm just going to give you my answer. So I'm going to start there. I think, or I could pretend I didn't figure it out. I think the answer will be 6. Now it says, will the quotient be less than or greater than? Well, even without knowing the answer is 6, I'm going to say the quotient will be greater than the dividend. Remember, the dividend was the 4. Because we are dividing by a number less than 1. So anytime you take a whole number like 4 and you divide it by a number less than 1, your answer, your quotient, is going to be bigger than what you started with. Okay? So that's my answer to part B. All right, now part C says use your model to explain how to find the quotient and what the quotient means. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to use that model. So what I did is, I'm going to say this, I split 4 rectangles in 2/3. By the way, into is one word. I was going to let that go, but I can't because of my OCD. I split 4 rectangles in 2/3 and then circled groups of 2/3. There were 6 groups. Okay, and what does that quotient mean? So the quotient means, the quotient is 6, so the 6 means it will take Keisha 6 days to run 4 miles. Okay, that's all it meant. The 6 means it's 6 days. Now, I do realize I forgot to answer part of my question up at the top. Maybe you caught that and it's been bugging you. Remember, it says, will she be able to run 4 miles in a week? Did you answer that, yes or no? So, think about it. If she has 4 miles to run and she's doing 2/3 a day, and that means that it will take her 6 days. Will she be able to run 4 miles in a week? Well, the answer to that is yes, because there's 7 days in a week, so she can get it done in 6 days. So I'm going to add that down to part C. So Keisha will be able to run 4 miles in a week. It will only take her 6 days. Okay, so if you didn't answer that part, like I almost forgot to, make sure you answer it. All right, so now you are done with me. As always, thank you for watching the video. And you can pause it and go back and make any corrections. But other than that, you're done with me. Later, guys.